Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. Hope you all enjoyed your weekend and enjoyed a lot of rugby league, some tight games, some not so tight games, but a lot to dissect. In terms of how my team went, I actually did really well this week. Finished on 1,533 pre-updates. Pretty happy with that round score. I will quickly go through my trades just after this as well, but let me know in the comments below, guys, what you all scored, what your trades were, and how you're thinking that's whether going to be a red arrow or a green arrow, and what your kind of initial questions are for the next week coming into the round 17 second bye round. And if you are enjoying this video, as always, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel as well if you haven't already, as I put more videos out throughout the 2021 SuperCoach season. Let's get into the round 16 roundup. So I'll quickly just go through my trades and what actually unfolded over the week. So as I mentioned in my trade targets video, I was only aiming to use hopefully around 3 to 4 trades. Ultimately, I actually decided, I ended up using all 5. First, I was going to use these 4, which was Curran, Cleary, Walsh and Pangai out, and that was to get in Fanul Blake, Sean Johnson, Tom Trbojevic and Corey Harionara. Those are the 4 trades and I was pretty set on that. But then the news was out that Flegler was actually going to be missing this game against against the Sharks. And so I thought he was going to be my second prop and I wasn't going to be really happy just having an auto emergency, especially knowing it was probably going to be like a Ben Trbojevic who was not going to get very many points. So I had to use that 5th trade really to kind of sort myself out. And I went Flegler to Haas because I was looking at round 17 options. The one that I thought maybe had the best potential for round 17 coverage, given that I'd already got Fanul Blake, it would have been maybe a Takiaho, but he'd already played by then, so I wasn't able to bring him in. I was thinking maybe a Toby Rudolph. Instead, I just went for Payne Haas because I thought Payne Haas is really, really cheap now, 470k. I did mention, my trade targets video that it was a case of don't buy, don't sell. But with all the news that came out after that, Matt Lodge leaving, going to the Warriors, Flegler out with the injury, I just thought, Payne Haas looks set to be playing big minutes here. And so I thought his appeal did improve for me. And at 470k, I thought, I'm buying him really, really cheap. Hopefully he's a season keeper at front row forward. So I picked him up and he actually ended up doing really, really well. So that paid off for me, but I have had to use all 5 trades. But really, I think that's helped set up my team for the run home. A few more guys I'll have to bring in, like your Dave Fafidis, etc. But I thought ultimately these 5 trades worked out really well for me. So I'd be really keen to see as well how you all use your 5 trades for this round. So let me know in the comments below. So first game of the round was the Roosters taking on the Storm, and I thought the Roosters were actually quite good in this one despite the scoreline for the first 10 minutes. After that, it was all Storm, they just completely rolled over the Chooks, and as a Roosters fan, it was pretty concerning seeing, a lack of defensive resolve and effort. This is normally something we see out of the Roosters, and yes, you can make excuses over like injuries, we've had so many, and retirements and things, but that shouldn't really change the amount of effort you put in. Whether it's the case of the Storm just being that good, it could be, the new rules as well, creating extra momentum for the Storm, but once they got on top of us, we just had no chance, and I'm sure 15 other team supported bases were very happy with that, but me, not so much. But yeah, so on the Storm side, Hines coming out on the top performance here with 104. He's probably looking around thinking, wait, you're all talking about trading me. What's going on? I'm just pushing out 80s and 100s for fun. And he just keeps getting it done in our centre wing, so super happy with that performance. I call it cheese and wine, cheese and wine, why not? Silly puns, because Brandon Smith just keeps getting it done, 90 points here, again scoring a try. He's on a massive try scoring streak, so he's just been doing, just killing me. He's doing super well in the hooker position, and even as a second row forward if you got him there as well. And Del Finucane again with another big game, scoring 94 here. He's had the past couple of weeks, he's actually done really well. I think he's been benefited by tries in both of those games, but maybe this is a trend that we can see moving forward. And as you can see there, just a lot of big performances out of the Storm, putting on 46 points and not conceding any. You would expect that, Kenny Bromwich 86, Cam Munster I thought had a really good game, bouncing back after some kind of poor performances in State of Origin, you'd say, or maybe not poor, but relatively quiet games for him. He put on a great try assist for Josh Adokar with a great kick, and scored a try of his own as well to end up on 83, so a big game from him. And Josh Adokar, as I mentioned, 82. Those are all the standout performances out of the Storm. I mean, Jerome Hughes had a bit of a quiet game, to be honest. You'd expect, out of 46 points, him to do much better than that, but he only scored 49. He did have, I think he got close to a line break, or he did have a line break, but really didn't really have any major kind of attacking stats. And this is actually now potentially something concerning. I think I had a quick look at his scores in the first 6 rounds of the season. I think the Storm draw at that point in time was a little bit tougher, but that was also when Pappenhausen was absolutely killing it. And there is a bit of concern that if Pappenhausen does come back in round to 18, is that going to make Hughes' scores regress moving forward? Because up until this point, without Pappenhausen in the team, Hughes has been doing amazingly. He scored all of his tons, almost 3 of his 4 tons, I think, without Pappenhausen in the team. And so this might be a bit concerning that Pappenhausen's now back. Maybe that might impact Hughes' scores. So that's just something to keep an eye on. Christian Welch as well with a 34 coming off the bench. I didn't play him this round because I knew that he was coming off the bench in the final team list, but he'll stick around in the team because, as you can see there, he responded to my tweet. So thanks, Christian, for opening up your Q&A in Twitter. For that, you can stay on my team for a little bit longer. On the Chooks, there's not really much to talk about, to be honest. I mean, you got Angus Crichton as the top performance with 54 in SuperCoach. I mean, he always just generally has pretty good base, a lot of runs, a lot of tackles, but no attacking threat at all really in this game. So 54 is, if that's his floor, obviously you'd be pretty happy with that. And as Isaac Liu, also with a 53, was the next best performance, but no one else scored over 50. I mean, what is encouraging though definitely is Daniel Tupou with a 49. I mean, that's essentially with 0 attacking stats. So, getting 49, he did have 1 line break down the left-hand side, which obviously boosted up his score by about 10 points. You take that away at 39 in a game where, the Chooks scored 0 points, that's pretty encouraging. And they're coming up against the Bulldogs next week in round 17. He had a very high break even, so he should be super, super cheap. And JWH with the 45, I mean, potentially some people might have gone for him as a round 17 playing front row forward. But I think, Tupou is probably the main guy I think a lot of people are going to be looking at. Not playing in this game was Matt Ikuvalu, who I do own. He was dropped actually in the final team list for Joseph Suwali on the wing, which is a bit discouraging, but I'm hoping that with in round 17 with Tedesco playing State of Origin, then hopefully Manu goes to fullback and Ikuvalu can come back into the team with Suwali at centre. So he should hopefully still cover the bye for me. If he is dropped again, I might just have to do a straight swap from Ikuvalu to Tupou, because I do believe that Tupou is a run-home keeper in your centre wing position. Speaking of Teddy, 45 points again. Just there's 0 attacking threat for the Roosters at all. I mean, they just kept kind of going side to side, trying to break the storm that way instead of playing through the middle in what was wet conditions. So it did seem odd, but only a 45 from him. I did recommend selling him in round 13 when the Roosters, when the first bye round was happening and the Roosters' tough draw was coming up. I think that was probably the right decision in my opinion, given the scores that he's had in the past fortnight, and he didn't play against the Gold Coast Titans as well. So really, I think owning Teddy through this period has been pretty bad in terms of an owner. And if you instead went to say a Gutherson, obviously maybe if you went straight to Turbo, that's probably done really well for you as well. And Sam Verrills, I think, a pretty interesting one to watch for next week. I mean, he got 42 and basically all in base, was just making a bunch of tackles, and I think he played around 60 minutes, which is an encouraging sign. Coming up against the Bulldogs next week, he should be very, very cheap at around 240k, I believe. So he could be someone you can plug into hooker. The hooker position, I think you're probably going Harry Grant and no one else. So if you have a Sam Verrills as a really cheap reserve, you don't play week on week, that should be okay, because then you're not really looking to reserve a second hooker anyway. So he can just be someone who covers you for round 17. He's nice and cheap. You can downgrade from a Josh Schuster, which I might do via a Connor Watson, who's got the right duels, and just leave him there for the rest of the season. So that could be the play with the Sam Verrills. And apart from that, not much else to speak about. I mean, you got Sam Walker with the 29. He just got absolutely smashed in this game by Justin Olam towards the end. Not really much else, to be honest, to speak about out of the Roosters. So the first game on Friday night, Warriors and Dragons. I mean, what a fun game to watch as a neutral fan. I mean, neither one of these guys wanted to win, to be honest. You had the Warriors cruising, 18-6 for such a long part of the game, and then the Dragons just come back at the end. They miss a goal. Norman missed a goal kick. Chad Townsend goes for a 4th tackle, random field goal when they're only up by 8. It's just crazy. Neither of these guys wanted to win, but ultimately one of them had to, and it was the Dragons who just came away. The Warriors just kept coughing up ball in the extra time, but the benefit of extra time was that we saw a lot of the forwards, who were very popular this round, do very well. Namely, Adam Fanua-Blake. I mean, with the 76 points, he played 76 minutes, so that really, really was beneficial for us. Owners, I just picked him up this week after flagging him as a good trade and target for the round. Had a lot of time on the field, so that obviously translated to a lot of the workload. Looked quite threatening as well. Definitely has that tackle busting ability. So really happy with that purchase of and getting 76 from him. And Wade Egan with the 77. He was actually on 100 plus, so he must have lost some major attacking stats and updates. But he also crossed over for a try, as did Eli Katoa. So the reasons for their big scores of 95 for Katoa, and Bunty Afoa as well with the 74. That did include a try. Tuivasa-Sheck was also very, very busy. Had quite a few attacking stats in this game with the 73. No one else really did super, super well out of the Warriors. I mean, the big downside out of them was obviously Tohu Harris going down with that injury. It looked like a failed HIA, but actually ultimately was an AC joint issue. So he could potentially be on the sidelines. I think he's probably looking like he's definitely going to be missing round 17, which is a big blow because he's the guy as so many people would have been jumping on this round, and obviously you can't predict these kind of injuries, so it's just really unlucky. Someone in the comments told me who just brought them in this week, who cursed Tohu Harris, because I've had him for quite a while, and yeah, obviously only the 22 points, but whether or not you sell or hold, I think it's probably at the point where your trades are so low, you're probably looking to hold a Tohu because he is a season keeper in my opinion, and hopefully he comes back on the field soon, and he is very important for the Warriors side as well. Out of the Dragons, again, there's probably not too much Supercoach relevance in terms of most of their players. I mean, Ben Hunt has actually been doing really, really well in the past fortnight, and also throughout the whole season, to be honest. He's averaging 68 before this game, and a 93. He did score a try. The Dragons' run for the next few games is not too bad, but towards the end, they do have some tough games, so they've got like back-to-back against like the Roosters and the Panthers, and they also have a game against the Rabbitohs, I believe, so his time might be coming to an end in terms of, being a really high upside play. But a 93 points, again, pretty solid. And Paul Vaughan as well, back-to-back scores in the 80s. He did have a try assist in this game, and I also believe in the last round as well, hence the reason for his 84. Aside from that, you've got Matt Duffy with a 77, so pretty solid. And Blake Laurie as well with a big performance. Obviously, a lot of the forwards benefited from playing the extra minutes in this game. So he came away with 71, and Jared Beale also scored a try on his way to a 70. And Corey Norman, obviously, we'll probably talk about him more in the sense of that he was goal kicking, missing field goals, all that kind of stuff. But in the end, he came out with 65, which is pretty respectable. But to be honest, if you look at the list of names in that Dragons team, I don't really think you're going to be going for too many other players. I think the big talking point out of this is obviously Tohu Harris's injury, but just in general, a really, really fun game to watch as a neutral fan. But ultimately, the Dragons took this one. So again, Friday night, second game, Panthers and the Eels. Friday night definitely put on two great games on for us. Panthers taking this one out just 13 points to 12 with a Matt Burton field goal at the very end of the game. Although Matt Burton's score, not great, look at that, only 18 points. It was really unfortunate actually, just in the last minute team, he was actually shifted to centre and Tyrone May went into the halves. Really not a fan of that. Even just watching the Panthers, I feel like Burton should be playing in the halves along with Jerome Luai. Although it looks like Jerome Luai is actually going to be missing potentially a few weeks because he had picked up a knee injury in that game. He's definitely been confirmed to not play in State of Origin Game 3. So a big blow for the Blues, losing both of our halves now actually, which is pretty crazy. So I would expect now that Matt Burton has to come into the halves surely. I think he'll be a much better Supercoach option playing in the halves as well. Playing at the left centre, he didn't really get many opportunities. Obviously, the Eels are a pretty good defensive side. Conversely, you have Api Coruscant with the big game of 97. He hasn't, to be honest, been really that Supercoach relevant at the moment. I don't really think you would be considering him still. I think you want to be seeing more consistent run of good performances from him. He did score a try in this game, which definitely helped. And probably without Cleary, will have to take on a bit more of a role in terms of attacking plays and stuff. So this might see a bit of an uptick in his points, but definitely not someone I'm going to be jumping on straight away. I'll want to watch and see for a couple more games potentially. Isaiah Yeo also with a decent game of 67 along with Kickout 67. Brian To'o, do we need to say any more from this guy? He just keeps delivering the points. He just absolute pinball out of his own end. Tackle breaks, everything. So he did very well with the 66, and Tyrone May, as I mentioned, playing in the halves, was able to get his hands on the ball a little bit more and come over the 61. So I think he's pretty cheap actually. So maybe if he gets a run in the halves for the next little while, maybe he's a proposition at centre wing as a cheapie. But I think at this point in time, me personally, probably not looking too hard at getting cheapies. And you got James Fisher-Harris with a 52, so not a fantastic game, but solid enough, you'd say. On the Eel side of things, Isaiah Papali'i just keeps getting it done. 122 points, absolute workhorse. He tackle breaks, so many runs, tackles, scored the try in this game as well, which obviously boosted his score up quite a bit. I don't think we need to speak anymore about this guy. If you don't have him already, just get him into your team. He's the best front row forward by far. Even I've got him at the moment in my second row forward. I just don't have the right duels to get him up there. Obviously, he's a play every single week in the 17. Very, very happy with him. And Nathan Brown has actually been doing super well in the past 3 games. He scored 77 this game. He scored 76 last week and 77 the week before that. So he's had a very nice run of games. I looked at his minutes. They haven't gone up drastically. He played about 59 minutes, in this game against the Panthers, but he obviously had a very high work rate. He's got a good PPM. And the past couple of games as well, he was playing around 65 minutes. So his minutes were fluctuating towards the middle of the season where some of his scores were a little bit lower. But maybe this is the Nathan Brown that I think a lot of people were hoping for preseason. So definitely at around, I think he's around 440k before obviously this game. His price, I can't remember his break even. He might go up a little bit more. but a 77 from him is pretty good. Same with Ryan Madison. Obviously, he had a lot of people, I think, selling him. He has had some fluctuations in his minutes, and obviously as a result, his SuperCoach scores. 70 points, obviously, this is what we know Matto can deliver, and he played 74 minutes, so definitely a big uptick in his minutes, definitely helped. So I think if you're a Matto owner, he's one of those guys I think you just kind of, I would personally hold him, because we know he is that gun caliber player, and I think obviously having a lot of depth at this time of the season where you might get restings and injuries down the track, I think it will become really important to have guys like Matto. If he can be your depth second row forward cover, that's not bad coverage in my opinion. So I think I'd be trying to hold on to him unless it facilitated a move to say like a David Feeder. If you were trying to upgrade to the top dog in second row forward, I think Matto for me personally is a hold. And Regan Campbell-Gillard as well with a pretty decent game, over 60 with a 63. And no one else performed above a 60-point game for the Eels. It was a low-scoring game, so obviously it was a lot more of the forwards dominating the bigger scores out of the Eels. You've got like a Clint Gutherson with the 28. He wasn't credited with a try assist for Mike Siva. That went to Mitchell Moses, but he got a try contribution for that little whatever basketball pass that you call that for Sivo. This was kind of expected, to be honest. I think a lower score against the Panthers. They're generally very restrictive and not allowing a lot of points, especially to opposition fullbacks. I held him this week, but I think I'm obviously not going to play round 17, but I'm very hopeful for in round 18 against the Titans. Eels can have a good game, and that might be the last game for Gutho before flipping him to maybe like a Ryan Pappenhausen. But overall, a very, very enjoyable game to watch again as a neutral fan. Big props actually have to go to Tom Opicic. It was called out in the game that his elder brother actually just passed away the same morning of the game, and he still played. So yeah, big props. Obviously, that's massive loss, and obviously big condolences. That's really hard, I think, to go out and play a game of footy just knowing someone in your family just passed away. So yeah, big condolences to him. But yeah, overall, very fun game to watch as a neutral fan. So the first game on Saturday, Bulldogs v Manly. Do I need to say anything more than that scoreline? Manly just had an absolute training run, destroying the Bulldogs, 66 points to 0. And the star of the show are those top three guys there: Ruben Garrick, Jason Saab, and Tom Trbojevic. Kicking 11 goals. The guy got his radar back after last week. I still think, I don't know what price is going to be at now, actually, with the 10 break even coming into this week, but he'll be priced well above 800k. To be honest, I still think he's worth it, because 169 points is huge. I just remembered my potential captaincy tip of Ruben Garrick. Or it would have been better to captain Ruben Garrick over Tom Trbojevic, looking at that. But obviously that would have been a real pod ballsy move. If anyone did that, please let me know in the comments below if anyone did that. That is super ballsy. But obviously Tom didn't really disappoint with 144. And as you can see, he's got orange shading. I've finally got him in my team, guys. I felt so good. Seeing that hat trick, I was like, I'm finally joined the party. And Jason Saab as well was doing really well with a hat trick and 3 try assists thrown in there as well. Just, can I say anything more? Around the edges, the Bulldogs were just absolutely atrocious. I only watched the highlights of this game, but to be honest, that's probably all I needed to see. I just needed to watch the tries and see how they unfolded. And Cherry Evans as well. I didn't really speak about him too much in my trade targets video this week, purely because I was trying to focus a little bit more on round 17 playing halfbacks. I do think obviously Cherry Evans is a great halfback for the run home, given how good Manly's draw is. And even towards the back end of last season, I think when Cherry Evans was goal kicking, his upside was huge. He was constantly getting 100-point games, and that was still when the new rules probably weren't fully in place. They were in place, but we weren't seeing the kind of bigger scorelines that we are seeing in this season so far. So there could be even more scope for Cherry Evans to have massive scores, and definitely someone I'm considering. I've still got Josh Schuster in my team, and potentially I might flip to Cherry Evans, say in round 18, now that Schuster's actually going to be out into round 18. I haven't made that decision yet, but potentially that's what I might do with Josh Schuster, because Cherry Evans obviously has his really high upside games, and as you can see, 119 points is huge. And Sipley also with 100 had a big game here, as did Lachlan Croker with a 82 and Carl Lawton with a 77. Carl Lawton should actually really benefit now with Schuster being out until round 18, and that Lawton will probably start in round 17 as well. So really good for any owners of him as a good buy coverage player. Not really much more to speak about, to be honest, from Manly side of things. Marty Tapau was a bit of a disappointment with the 46. No attacking stats for him in this game. It was all about the fullbacks, the wingers, and the halfback in this game for Manly. And yeah, not really much more to speak about on the Bulldogs, to be honest. You have Josh Jackson with a 63, basically all in base, and Luke Thompson with a 52, I guess kind of going through his usual work rate. But yeah, it's all about the top 4 guys there, I think, for Manly, and especially Garrick. I mean, 169 is ridiculous. Coming off his big game from last week, I think he's just cementing himself. You have to get him in, I think, in my opinion, at centre wing. The points that he's getting with Manly, putting on this many points, his goal kicking, he kicked 11 goals there. But yeah, Garrick is looking essential in my opinion, as is Tom. And can we just quickly please also comment on how unselfish Tom is? I mean, he could have scored for another try for himself, but he wanted to lay it on for his brother, and the play got called as a forward pass all the way back at the start of the try. So yeah, Tom, please be a bit more selfish for all of our Supercoach owners. Now I can say that, please be more selfish, because we want more and more points from you. Sub, I don't know about essential, but if you had him and you played him, obviously I would have hoped you played him against the Bulldogs. Obviously you're profiting huge in the points here. So Manly just delivering a bunch of points here, both for Supercoach and in the NRL. So the second game on Super Saturday was the Raiders taking on the Titans, and what was pretty ordinary performance, to be honest, from the Raiders, with the Titans taking this one out pretty comfortably, 44 points to 6. The only try scored for the Raiders was through Sam Williams, set up by Jordan Rapana, so they both had relatively okay scores at 57 and 56. Josh Papali'i actually had a monster performance in the first half. I think he was sitting on around 45 points. He had just churned through so much work, but he wasn't really getting supported by any of his other forwards. And ultimately he finished on 64. And Corey Harionara, just one of the guys who I did trade in this round, actually really happy to see a 61 when he really didn't have that much attacking threat. He had a few tackle busts, but really that 61 was coming just purely from base. I did want to bring him in this round because I thought a game against the Titans, hopefully on the edge, would provide some good attacking points for him. They didn't come, obviously, but 61 in base, almost all in base, really actually was a pretty decent score, so I was actually pretty happy with that. And aside from that, there was really no one else to speak about, and the Titans just really ran over the Raiders in general. You can see there we got Jamal Fogarty with a big 104. He only just got 150 against the Roosters a couple of weeks back, so he's put in really big scores now in quick succession. Potentially maybe as a pod have to consider for the run home. The Titans draw is not too bad, I think, for the rest of the season, but I think quite a few people, including myself, had him at the start of the season and probably a little bit put off by him because he does tend to be inconsistent. But the Titans have shown definitely an ability to score a lot of points, and obviously if he goal kicks, he hopefully would be able to get a pretty decent average up around the 60s, so definitely maybe someone to consider. And AJ Brimson also had a very good game out at fullback, coming away with a 93, and Mo Fotuaika as well. He always has really great attacking threat because he has a lot of tackle busting potential, and he did score a try in this game as well on his way to a big 91. I think definitely someone that might be worth consideration in the front row forward for the run home. And Philip Sammy also with an 86, pretty good game. Dave Fifita obviously is the big talking point for the Titans. I mean, he came away with 82 points, which is obviously a really strong effort. That did include a try, but it also did include a sin bin and, obviously the penalty conceded as well. So that 82 is, minus 10 minutes. Minus 10 points. He also was rested for about 10 minutes as well, so he only really scored 82 in about 60 minutes, which is really strong. He is potentially not going to play Game 3 for Queensland for State of Origin due to a judiciary charge. I can't actually quite remember what the charge was, unfortunately. But if that challenge is unsuccessful, he will miss Game 3 and he will actually play fully fit in round 18, which is actually really beneficial for Supercoach purposes. So expect Dave Fifita to, I think, be one of the best trading targets for round 18, as obviously he won't play next week as the Titans have the bye, whether or not he plays Origin or not. And aside from that, we had some other good performances, obviously, from Proctor, Ash Taylor, Brian Kelly, Patrick Herbert, all scored in the 70s. Obviously, guys who did score tries or had some good attacking stats in there, as the Titans basically just ran right over the Raiders. And the only downside, I guess, for the Titans was Tyrone Peachy, only with 4 points, as he did play off the bench and didn't play that many minutes. So the final game on Super Saturday was the Knights taking on the Cowboys, and the return of Pearce and Ponga definitely, did well for the Knights as they won very comfortably, 38 points to 0. Connor Watson actually was the best performer out of the Knights, and really happy. Just 10 minutes before the Knights game kicked off, I did have the reserve on Dave Nofaluma, but I looked at it and I thought, Pearce and Ponga are back. It's against the Cowboys. Maybe, his floor is usually around 50, 55. So I thought, why not just throw him in? Because Nofaluma, tough matchup. Maybe I was hoping for some tries, but instead I just went for the safety of Watson. And instead, to my surprise, 106 points. That included a double. Always has a lot of good base and a lot of work rate. So really happy that I, switched to him last minute as a reserve. And Kalen Ponga as well with a big game on his return with a 94. That did include a double and also a try assist as well. So again, Ponga just showing, throwing his hat into the name of gun fullbacks that we need to consider for the run home. We've already got Tom Trbojevic, who's basically a lock. And then I think it really comes down to Ponga or Pappenhausen for the run home. The Knights' run is pretty good from I think around round 20, as they do face the Broncos twice in that spell, and we know that the Broncos concede a lot of points to fullbacks, so Ponga definitely is one to consider. Although he isn't goal kicking anymore, that does look like it's now been handed over to Jake Clifford, so that is definitely a big black mark against Ponga and his Supercoach credentials, because on the opposite side of things, you would expect Ryan Pappenhausen to actually get the goal kicking for the Storm, and that really just adds so much to his ceiling. So I think that definitely throws a spanner in the works in terms of Ponga as an option, but obviously Ponga can throw massive scores up even without his goal kicking. Dominic Young as well scored a try on his way to an 82. Actually, I think he scored 2 tries. And Mitch Pearce as well had a pretty handy game from his return with a 71. And Mitch Barnett, I guess, is more Supercoach relevant. Playing 80 minutes or close to 80 minutes on an edge is definitely much better for his Supercoach prospects. He looks a lot more threatening in attack and also gets through a lot more, not a lot more base, but he just gets the minutes that allow him to get better base. And he ended up with 55 with no real attacking threat, so very solid. I think, if he is continuing to play 80 on an edge, he definitely is a good hold. Although I think in round 18 is when Tyson Frizzell is supposed to come back for the Knights, and then we might have to reconsider, because if Barnett moves back into that kind of, shared lock role with Connor Watson, that for both of those guys really does impact their potential. And Jaden Brayley, I think, is the last guy I really wanted to speak about. I mean, I put him in the category of he's not doing bad enough to sell him, but he's just not doing amazing that whether or not you're comfortable playing him in your 17. I mean, he is, for most people, like myself, they're starting number 9 in the Supercoach world, and 45 points, really he's lost his attacking threat that he used to have at the beginning of the season. It seems obviously with Ponga and Pearce and stuff, they do tend to play a bit more on the edge. They've got some good attacking threat out there when they had the likes of Bradman Best, etc. And we're seeing that, I think, this trend, not just with Brayley, but a lot of number 9s, it seems like the game is being played more towards the edge. We're seeing that with Damien Cook. His scoring is definitely down because he just has to throw it out to his halfback and his 5'8", and they do all of the attacking work, in addition to the fullback. So yeah, Brayley, for me, it's not someone I'm really pushing at the moment to sell. It will just be more of a case of eventually, if I can get to a Harry Grant, Brayley might be making way then, but apart from that, he'll be hanging around, I think, for the long term. On the Cowboys side, to be honest, not a lot to speak about here. I mean, you had Scott Drinkwater as the highest point scorer here with 60. I will also note that these points that I'm showing here are pre-updates, so they may change after I record this video and put out this video. But yeah, so really not much to talk about. I mean, you've got a Reece Robson with a 59, who did actually look quite threatening at times, but he also gets rotated along with Tamalolo, who I think is the king of rotation now at the Cowboys. He played about 59 minutes, so he basically was getting about 1 point per minute for his 59-point game. I don't think it's still enough. I mean, it's close to 60, which is, kind of the minimum I think you'd probably want to be hoping for out of a Tamalolo. But for me, I'm just still not thrilled. I mean, he is their man in terms of in the forwards, to give them the go forward. It just perplexes me, honestly, that he's subbed off when they feel like they really need him out there. But anyway, that's for the Cowboys coaches to decide. And until that point that they, throw him out there for 65, 70 minutes, I don't really think we can consider him too much for Supercoach. The only other real person to maybe potentially talk about is a Val Holmes, only with a 28-point effort there. I mean, the Cowboys not scoring any points obviously does not bode well for Val Holmes, whose points mainly will come from his goal kicking and setting up tries, etc. But again, I think this is good news in that if you're a non-owner like myself, we can wait until hopefully round 20 when the Cowboys draw does start to open up. Hopefully it comes nice and cheap and you can be slot straight into our center wing at that point in time. So the first game on Sunday was, again, quite an enjoyable game, actually, with the Broncos upsetting the Sharks 26 points to 18. The Broncos looked really, really strong in defense, which is not something that we've seen all season long, although it didn't stop, the fullbacks still scoring well against them, with Will Kennedy getting an 87 here. But really, overall, I was actually quite impressed by the Broncos and their defensive resolve. The Sharks had a lot of ball at their end in the first half, but the Broncos most of the time were able to, resist that attack and able to come away with points as well on the other end. I think Tessie News obviously a big part of that, come away with a big 96-point game. Out at fullback, he's so dynamic, a lot of tackle busting, able to break the line as well with a runaway try towards the end of the game. So yeah, really, really big game from Tessinu, and Payne Haas, I think, was the standout for the Broncos. As I mentioned at the top of the video, I traded him in for Tom Flegler, hoping for bigger minutes from him, given the lack of experience forward now at the Broncos for the remainder of the season. And I was, very happy to see him do well. He played 65 minutes, which is definitely big minutes. And his work rate during that time is just Payne Haas-like. He just always seems to turn through so much. He's got a massive engine. He also has some very nice silky hands for a try assist to Bullimore, which obviously I was ecstatic to see. I was like, line break assist, try assist, that's 20 points there, right there. So yeah, Payne Haas did amazing for me, and also really, really good play at the very, very end of the game just to bat the ball away. Big return to form here, and I think obviously the Broncos don't play in round 17, but from round 18, if this continues in that Payne Haas is going to keep playing these big minutes, he's definitely worthwhile for consideration. And apologies, I know I did kind of go back on my own advice in terms of saying he's a don't buy, don't sell, but given the change in circumstances with Matt Lodge leaving, etc., I thought getting in Payne Haas would probably be a good move, and it turned out that way for this round, so really happy with that. And Kotoni Staggs had a great game back from his extended layoff, looked really, really strong in attack. Basically set up one of Tessinu's tries with a really damaging run down the right hand side, and 60 points. Last season a bit of the appeal from him was that he was goal kicking. Jermaine Osako has still retained the goal kicking duties in this match, even though Staggs has returned. Osako has been goal kicking pretty well, so I would be surprised to see if Staggs does goal kick, but if Staggs does goal kick, potentially that does increase his appeal. It's just a question of whether you see the Broncos actually scoring points consistently throughout the remainder of the season, but I think Staggs definitely want to consider a bit of a point of difference, and someone I think is a really, really strong centre wing proposition, so definitely someone I think to keep monitoring. I can't quite remember the Broncos' draw for the rest of the season, but I do believe they've kind of played most of their tough games against the top opposition, so now they should have some more favourable games coming up. So Staggs I think could be a really good proposition to go for. Tyson Gamble as well with the 58 was pretty decent, had real impact in the game. He had a big tackle on Jesse Ramian to have him knock the ball on when the Sharks were almost looking like scoring a try, being his serial pest, as he kind of has this bit of a alias now, as that pest gets in your face and stuff. I think Broncos fans are probably happy to see that. If you're a non-Broncos fan, you're probably like, you hate that guy, but every team kind of needs one of those players. But your overall Broncos actually really, really impressive, and I think obviously some big scores there from Tessinu and Payne Haas. Out of the Sharks, Aiden Tolman was the first try scorer. Probably not something you'd expect, if you're putting a multi down or a first try scorer down for the Sharks, you probably wouldn't be betting on Aiden Tolman. But with that try and his base, he came away with a pretty big score of 88. And Will Kennedy, as I mentioned, still was getting it done, even though they lost. The fullbacks always seem to do well against the Broncos. He had 3 line breaks in this game, combined with some good tackle breaks. I think he also did have a try assist thrown in there as well. So an 87-point game from him, pretty solid. Probably in retrospect, instead of going for Reece Walsh that I did a couple of weeks back, I probably could have gone for like a Will Kennedy instead, just to cover that round 17 period, as he will do a pretty decent job. I think kind of giving you around these 75 to 90-point games in the good matchups. Sean Johnson as well, one of my trade-ins, had very good game as well, taking the line on, looked very threatening, 75 points, so he had a line break, some tackle busts. He also was able to get his goal kicking, a lot of forced dropouts, so really was getting his points in a variety of ways, which is what you want to see, just not so reliant on one specific way. So 75 points, really happy with that, even only scoring 18 points and having no major attacking stats. Pretty happy with the 75-point game there from SJ. Connor Tracy as well had a very good game playing in the centres, bit of their Mr. Fix-It in the back line, coming over with 68, and Sione Katoa as well back, scored a 66. Katoa had a very good start, I think, of last season, or he had a good season overall playing on the wing there. So I think Katoa is also someone to monitor, especially if he continues to play on the right-hand side, which will be on the side that Sean Johnson plays. I think you're always going to prefer the players on that side, as he's going to be the more dominant half you'd expect in the Sharks outfit. And Jesse Ramian as well, kind of briefly mentioned him, 56 points. 56 points where he had no major attacking stats. Again, this is just kind of what he does. This is his flaw. He's got really good base, got really good tackle busting and offloading ability. So yeah, a 56-point game from your center wing who has no major attacking stats is what you buy this guy for. And so I think while, yes, he hasn't quite given the upside yet that most people would be hoping for when they bought him, obviously I think this is a good sign of things to come in that he's not giving you any stinker scores really. So I think Ramian is still worthwhile considering in your center wing position, as he won't really give you these really horrible scores. Another guy I did want to mention is also Ronaldo Mulatalo. I think he had a great game, but was unlucky with a couple of things. I don't think he's been paid a try assist. He had a little hook pass out for Connor Tracy. I don't think that was given as a try assist at this point in time. In updates, that may change, and that might see his point scoring go up a little bit. But Mulatalo, I think, is still a great point of difference centering option instead of like a Jesse Ramian. He is a little bit cheaper. And playing on the wing, we do typically see these wingers get more higher upside games, as they can easily cross over for a double or potentially a hat-trick as well. So Mulatalo I still think is a great buy, even though he only scored 40 points here pre-update. So the final game of the round was the West Tigers taking on the Rabbitohs in their empty stadium at Leichhardt Oval, which was a real shame to see. This is kind of the situation they're in at the moment, but the Rabbitohs were still able to do their business on the left edge, 38 points to 22, comfortably beating the Tigers there. All the damage was really done in the first half. I think they ran up a score of about 22 or 26 to zip in the first half, and really were just in control of the game from that point on. And the damage was really done by their left edge, as I mentioned. Alex Johnson and Cody Walker were the main beneficiaries. Tweeted out a couple of times they were both setting each other up for tries, and I was just like, yes, give me these SuperCoach points. As a Roosters fan, it is odd seeing, cheering on Rabbitohs players, but well, I mean, I'm probably going to get killed in the comments from any Roosters fans, but, for the SuperCoach points, I'll cheer them on, But yeah, 103 from Johnston, 97 from Cody Walker, and really, I think Johnston was about 101 at halftime, and Walker was in about 93. They basically just took a break in the second half and didn't do much else. The game was being played a little bit differently in the second half. It was more through the middle and more through on the right-hand side with Adam Reynolds, which is why you can see that Campbell Graham had a really big game here as well of 98. Bit of deja vu here, he scored a double in this game, and we saw in the back half of last season, in the last 5 or 6 games, Campbell Graham went off. He was going 90 plus consistently, having really big games. That was him playing on the left-hand side though, which is obviously the side that we know that the Rabbitohs prefer, but maybe it's a bit of deja vu in that he will have another good run towards the back end of the season, as the Rabbitohs draw is very, very nice. So Campbell Graham, I think, is definitely a point of difference centre wing to consider. If you say you don't want to shell out the money for like an Alex Johnson, I think Campbell Graham is like at least 150k cheaper. Even if you don't want to go for a Gagai, as obviously he will play State of Origin, you can get Campbell Graham in to cover round 17 and could be a real point of difference to consider in your centre wing. Cam Murray is also another guy I do want to call out. I mean, he did score a try in this game, which did boost up his score to 78. Potentially, he has put in some big scores for the past couple of weeks. He had obviously 78 pre-updates here. He scored around 90 odd, I think, the week before. Potentially, he's coming back to that gun status, because the beginning of the season, he really wasn't, I think, putting up those keeper scores. He was getting around the 55 to 60 max. But I think when people had him at the start of the season, I think they were hoping for that 65-70. We are starting to see them some attacking stats now come into his game, which is what original owners were hoping for. As I mentioned, Rabbitohs draw is really, really nice. I do think Cam Murray's overall form is improving as well. I think State of Origin has really kicked him into gear. He's been, I think, tremendous for the Blues in New South Wales, and I think now that he's come back to his club, I think he's taking a lot of that State of Origin performance and putting it in the Rabbitohs. So I think Cam Murray, I think he's very cheap as well. I don't even think he's at 500k. Obviously that could change after this round. Definitely someone I think worthwhile considering from round 18 onwards, as obviously he won't play next week because of State of Origin. I think he could be a great point of difference for the run home in your second row forward as well, if you don't want to shell your money for like your Angus Crichtons, etc. Latrell Mitchell had a bit of a quieter game here with a 34. I mean, most of the damage was being done by Walker, Reynolds, and Damien Cook to an extent, although Damien Cook, still only really putting in pretty low scores of 41. As I mentioned, I think this is a bit of a situation that's happening with the number 9s, is that they just seem to get the ball out to the edge and not really running through the middle. So I think that is definitely hampering Damien Cook's scores, even though the Rabbitohs are piling on the points. The Tigers, they look set for a 60-point hammering again, but they did kind of come their way back. I do think the Rabbitohs did take their foot off the gas a little bit to an extent, but yeah, Tigers still putting in 22 points. I mean, you had Adam Dewey score a double, so he went pretty good with a 95-point game. Jacob Little had a lot of tackles. I think he had around 49 tackles. He did have some attacking stats thrown in there as well, so he went pretty large as well with 93 points there. Definitely the two standouts for the Tigers there in terms of SuperCoach point scoring. You have Luciano Leilua as well with the 67. Always looks really damaging, has that tackle busting potential. I will mention Dane Laurie and Dave Nofaluma as well, two very highly sold players in the past fortnight. I mean, Dane Laurie did score a try here that did help get his score up to 51, so he is still kind of doing decent, I think, actually in centre wing. But I think if you have one of these two or still both, I think the tough run for the Tigers has now finished. They had the last month where they were versing like Souths, Eels, Storm, Penrith, etc. Now they're actually coming into a very nice run for the end of the season. I think the only real tough opposition they have is the Panthers, I think in round 24. But they play the Broncos, the Bulldogs twice in this next spell. So I think if you've got these guys, I definitely would, I think, still be holding. So I do think the Tigers may still have some more life left in them as they run into hopefully maybe secure number 9 on the ladder, because that is the Tigers' position. So yeah, Nofaluma and Laurie, I still think, if you've held to this point, I think I would look and hold, because their draw now is really starting to turn in their favour. Nofaluma with the 43, that did include an intercept try. As I mentioned, I didn't play Nofaluma after changing it to Watson, and obviously that really helped me. That was about a 60-point swing, but obviously Nofaluma getting that try did help in that, I didn't want him to have a terrible game because I want his prices to hover. I want him to potentially get more expensive again, but Nofaluma I'm still happy enough to keep him in my team. Didn't play him, but that's fine. I'll play him now on the matchups when the game's a little bit easier for the Tigers. Well, that's it, guys. That is the round 16 wrap up. As I mentioned, let me know in the comments what you guys scored, what trades you did, and how you're looking for round 17 in terms of numbers. And also let me know if you've got any questions coming into this week. I can maybe integrate them into the round 17 trade targets video. If you guys enjoyed the video, as always, would really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate all the support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.